episode today is about expert witnesses in law, particularly around the subjects of judgment, ethics, behavior, intuition, and lots more. Today, I am joined by Dr. John Burlson, one of our expert witnesses within the Help Lawyer Network. This will lead on to other conversations with other experts within our network. Enjoy this conversation. Let's dive in to the role of expert witnesses in law.
You've entered Legal Al, where sharp legal minds meet the power of strategic intuitive intelligence and inner awareness. Hosted by someone that is a veteran, an author, and is an individual experienced in specialist security operations, strategic intuitive intelligence, and transformational psychology, this is not your typical legal podcast. We explore what most lawyers never say out loud: burnout, grief, inner dissonance, and what it really takes to sustain a legal career with clarity, purpose, and personal alignment. Alongside powerful solo insights, you'll hear thought-provoking conversations with members of the Help Lawyer Network, lawyers, legal support professionals, and expert witnesses, sharing real stories from the front lines. This is the space where law meets what's rarely talked about. Welcome to Legal Al, where wisdom meets the law and strategic intuitive intelligence guides the way.
Morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. This is John. This is the Legal Owl, where wisdom meets the law. Today, I am delighted. I have one of our own members, one of our expert witness members, Dr. John Burlson, who is a spine surgeon. He's in Tennessee, and today we're going to talk a bit about his work and his expertise and what he brings to the legal profession, perhaps a little bit more about maybe cases that he's been involved in, how he works with lawyers in deposition or any other case matters, but also, his journey from college years to him becoming a surgeon. He's board certified and has a license to practice in Tennessee and in Texas. So please welcome my guest, Dr. John Burlson. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Very well, very well. Good to have you here. John, I want to talk a little bit about your background, how you decided to become a surgeon, or, did you actually, want to be a surgeon all your days? Maybe you wanted to be an American footballer. I don't know. But let's talk a little bit about you and your background, your passions, before we get into the kind of legal stuff and the legal jargon.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, that wasn't the goal from childhood. But turns out I didn't have the athletic prowess to make millions of dollars playing a sport. So I was forced to find some type of real job. And ultimately, I went to a small kind of conservative Baptist school near where I grew up in Dallas. Was actually thinking about doing something related to that. I took an anatomy class, just loved it. And in talking to my anatomy professor, it became pretty clear that if I didn't want to be an anatomy professor, the only other way I could really use this stuff was by going to medical school. So anyway, that pushed me down a path of that and changed my mind a few times. And I want to do cardiothoracic surgery, or I want to do hand surgery. And like anything, once you get exposed to all the options, you start making decisions. And I liked orthopedic surgery a lot. It really resonated with me in terms of the black and white nature of something's broken and now you fix it. And like many people that do what I do, we had some orthopedic injuries when we were kids that shaped our admiration for the profession. And then ultimately, when I got into the orthopedic residency, it was decision-making about what subspecialty. And I really enjoyed the microscopic nature of spine surgery and how delicate and precise it had to be. But then you still got to sometimes put screws in. You still occasionally could take orthopedic call, which is what I do electively. I do spine surgery, but I take call at hospitals and fix fractures. And so I thought it presented a good mix of control and chaos, and was quick enough and different enough day to day where I wouldn't get bored of it or tired of it. And I really enjoyed it so far.
You're obviously a family man, because in your Help Lawyer profile, you've got pictures of your family, and it must be quite handy having kids that are probably boisterous and love to, and maybe if they break a bone that you can fix them.
Well, we joke all the time that I fix more drywall than I fix bones. Because with the kids around the house, I got 4 little ones from 3 to 8, and the oldest 3 are boys. The youngest, the girl, she's becoming a bruiser herself, I think, because of her brother. So,
Wow.
you know, yeah, it keeps me pretty busy. But I get to bring them up to the hospital every once in a while on the weekend for rounds. And thanks to Amazon, we can get them scrubs that they keep growing out of and can do rounds with dad. So that's a pretty cool thing for them to kind of get involved early and see some of the stuff that we get to do.
Do you think your kids will follow in your footstep, John?
I think with 4, I mean, we think odds are pretty good we get one of them. But I got one that, I mean, he might actually be the professional athlete someday. I got one,
Really?
yeah, and then they're just all different, so we'll see. And we'll see, to be honest, and I think the attorneys will probably understand this. A lot of it depends on what does that look like in 20 years. I know plenty of attorneys that would have their kids not be attorneys, and same thing with physicians. And,
Yeah.
we'll see. I think we just try to do what any parent does, make them as well-rounded as we can and put them in a position where they can find happiness where it suits them.
I don't have any kids or anything myself, but I know that if I did have a kid, I wouldn't want them to follow in my footsteps and go into the military or do any of the stuff that I did. I'd be like, yeah, become a surgeon.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing about other people's professions. They always seem great.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Just don't do what I did. Just go this route here.
Right.
How did you? Now, obviously, you work a lot with legal firms, with attorneys, and you moved. How did you become an expert witness? I mean, you don't just fall into. I don't suppose you say, I'm going to be an expert witness.
Right.
It just kind of happens mostly.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think attorneys are probably aware of, but it's not necessarily something they teach you in law school, is that, we don't get training for any of this stuff in medical school. But it's not just that you don't get training. It's that you're not really aware that it exists. And when I talk to my friends that do what we do now, wasn't even on our radar. It wasn't a thing we ever even thought of. And more importantly, when you go to medical school and you're deciding between orthopedics or pediatrics, you're just thinking about what you want to do during your day to practice medicine. You're not thinking about ancillary income streams or other opportunities.
Yeah.
So I bring that up because orthopedics, neurosurgery, probably psychiatry. There's some fields that are more heavy into the expert witness than other fields. Some of them don't really exist at all or very minimally. And so I think that was one of the interesting things, that when I got to fellowship, which was a private practice in Dallas with 20 spine surgeons, great training. But because they were on the private practice side, there were some of them that were doing device company consulting and medical legal work that are kind of similar in the sense that it's a separate 1099 type thing you might do. And then it's just, what are you interested in? Well, I'm very interested in talking about spine surgery, so it doesn't bother me to discuss a case. I like reading. I, like a lot of attorneys, was trying to decide between med school and law school at one point in my life. And
really? So you wanted to be a lawyer?
Oh, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I like the idea of forming an argument. My wife could corroborate that. But
I love that.
Yeah, that's always been fun to me. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at, doing both, is it possible? Yeah, but it's at some point you got to stop going to school and make some money. And so I always enjoyed that interaction. And when I was out for about a year or so into my real job, my partner, who was a spine surgeon, had done some of those and some case reviews, and asked, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And I told him, I remember from fellowship some of the guys doing it. Could you kind of walk me through it? And so I had a defense firm, just a local firm here in town, that had a case that he just couldn't meet the deadline on because he had another case going on.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, I still have it in my house. But I have every sheet of those. It was probably about 1,500 pages, so it wasn't a small one. But everything is tabbed out. Tons of handwritten notes. I mean, I think I billed for a third of the hours I actually did because I was embarrassed at how long it took me to just get through this.
You've learned now, because it is time intensive as an expert.
It is, and I was so slow too, and I was so OCD about it. I mean, it's like I was going to present this paper to someone that no one cares about.
I get it.
But I did enjoy the process a lot, and I enjoyed the conversation with the defense attorney, and to really kind of understand what they wanted from me in terms of formatting. And then the cool thing is after you do a few, they would. I started getting referrals from them because their firm, liked the work that I performed. And then the biggest compliment I've gotten in medical legal work was after a second or third deposition I did. I was again with a defense firm there, and they had the plaintiff's attorney was, giving me some relatively tough questions. And I sleep well at night. My job is just to tell the truth as I see it. And if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was kind of doing that, and he was leaning in pretty hard to me, and I'm like, man, this guy really does not like me, And when we turned the camera off, he was like, "Hey, I got some work for you," and I thought that was such a great compliment, and it allowed me to kind of cross.
That was the plaintiff.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm like, I can see that from my side of things, like I can respect that you're doing the best job for your client, but it's allowed me to work for both sides a little bit, where now I feel like that helps a lot when I do get deposed, and I can say, oh, I'm 60% plaintiff or 60% defense this year, or whatever. And then when I get new cases, which my wife kind of does the intake a lot on, I don't necessarily know. I do the whole report, and then I frequently have to ask her, like, is this for the plaintiff or the defense again? Really, just because I want to make sure my tone is appropriate in the phone call, not because it's going to be an opinion, But it's been a fun thing for us to kind of carve out time for and do something different than medicine. And it obviously augments our income, which is great. But I can be less stressed about taking vacations and stuff because I can do these types of things whenever I really want to.
And there's plenty of cases because, at the end of the day, there's so many accidents and so many things that go on out there. And let's face it, we're living in a culture now where legal representation and even lawsuits is kind of the norm. As much as I hate to say it, I remember I was in an accident, and before I got home, I had phone calls, and the next day how the heck they had emails. I had things coming through my door. So it is kind of it is like that. What was your first deposition like? When your very, very first time that you went up there, were you nervous? Were you
terrified? Yeah, I because we operate again similar to attorneys. Like when you walk in the room, the attorneys are the people in their room that are in charge, whether it's an attorney or a judge who was an attorney, they're in the operating room, I'm in charge. And so you kind of have this confidence that comes with that you've built and earned over your time training. But when I go into the deposition with two attorneys and, they got the camera, this was like just a video deposition. I'm like, I'm not in charge. It's very clear that I am not in charge. And, and then they ask under oath, of course, have you been deposed before? So you can't lie. So you have to say, no, I have not. So then now everyone knows you're a rookie and you have no idea what you're doing. And they were super nice about it. But it was an interesting process. And I had the attorney I worked with on the very first deposition was like, hey, I'm not going to try and sway your opinion. That's not what we're here for. But I want you to understand the process. Like they're going to ask these things, and all the stuff that's probably common sense to lawyers that wasn't to me. Things like, just answer that one question. If you don't understand the question, have them phrase it in a way where they break down the question, because they'll try to do compound questions, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll say, look, they know who you are. They know you're a physician. They know you think you're smart. They're going to try to let you think you're smart all the way to the answer that they want,
Sure.
And,
they've got a strategy. They've got a strategy behind it. They know exactly what they're doing.
They do. And I found that appealing to not only be, there's kind of a play there where you're kind of answering the questions and you're understanding where they're trying to get a little edge in their direction on there. And sometimes you have to give a little bit because that's the honest truth. And sometimes you can push back a little bit, or sometimes you can just not really answer the question the way that they're asking it, because that's not, especially with those depots like that, there can be an objection to every question they ask, and you don't know what's going to be allowed and not allowed. So you're just trying to kind of be consistent internally. That's my whole thing. Is I want to make sure if they look up depositions from my first one to my last one, they're going to see that I was internally consistent.
They're going to see that you've got a pattern of consistency. How did you feel when you were, obviously, when you're up on the stand or you're on video, how did you feel when they maybe got heavy with you, when they're trying to push you into a corner or push you into... I can imagine your first time with it, John. You're like, wow, I never expected this. Were you prepared for it?
Yeah.
Or did you watch a lot of legal shows?
Tons. So like,
I knew that.
but I'll tell you, I took it with a little bit of a grain of salt because I also watch medical shows, and I know like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
this is 50% true and 50% beyond. So I had an idea that, yeah, I had a couple that were, get a little, like I had one where they were kind of leaning into, how much money do you make for this? And I'm like, well, it's all on the fee schedule. I'm happy to go through it. I'm not trying to hide anything, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's a video you're trying to play in court to lose sympathy for me because I get paid well for this, like sure, whatever. But they were kind of leaning into that. And then he said something that was like, I couldn't believe it. The other attorney's face like froze, where he said like, "Oh, and you have 4 kids," and I was like, "Yeah," because he had asked about that. And some of the preambles are just kind of strange.
Yeah.
He was like, "So, do you do this extra work because you need the money to pay for your kids?" Like that phrase like that. And I was like, I mean, why does anyone work? So that's kind of my defense mechanism for that. Is like, if you're asking questions about philosophy, we can get philosophical pretty quick here. I'm like, why do you work? Why do you show up? Why do you
Yeah.
defend?
Yeah. Yeah.
Here, and so, but
And
it was,
I think as well, John, that shows a little bit of weakness in them to go down
yeah,
a philosophical route, because it shows that they haven't strategized or they don't have the empirical evidence that they need that they can fire back with you. So the minute they get philosophical, they're showing their weakness.
well, and I felt like, and this was, I obviously didn't discuss this with the attorney I was with. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I felt like, well, if he's going to show this, if they choose to show this portion of the video, then I want him to make sure that he can show a portion of the video that's reflects this whole thing. It's not just a snippet that, makes me look bad or something. But when they really just hammer on how much I'm being paid for something, which is in line, I'm below the industry rate here in Nashville for some of the neurosurgeons. And I'm like, well, I mean, if it's, I'm confused about why it's relevant what I get paid, but it's not relevant what you get paid for this case.
It's true.
None of them want to talk about that. Well, we're deposing you. And I'm like, well, can I depose you next? Like, I mean, what's crazy, And so it just seemed crazy to me. That's really like the only time that I had someone really dig anything personal. Cause I don't mind if they get aggressive about the case. I'm like,
Yeah.
good for you. That's your person you're trying to defend. I'm maybe giving you an opinion that's not helpful for your case, or maybe counter to what that person said. Like I do independent exams, and they can say, well, my patient said that they're weak. And I'm like, well, on exam, they're not weak, and they might really get pointed and frustrated by that. And I get it, because it's their case and it's their client. That's their job. It's my job to not get super, butthurt about it or get frustrated or anything. Just, hey, and I tell them that a lot when they repeat the same question 3 different ways because they just don't like the answer. I'll tell them, hey, I understand that you don't need to say this. It is what it is. We can ask it 20 more times. It ain't going to change.
It's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah. And again, I'm empathetic as a human being, but I'm not empathetic to the point of committing perjury, So like, it kind of is what it is. But but it's for the most part, people are respectful, and I appreciate that. And I try to be respectful of their time and their profession as well.
Do you think, John, that lawyers maybe expect too much from their experts, depending whether you're defense or you're plaintiff? Because I know from other experts that and a good friend of mine is an expert, the amount that they expect is often way more and too much and a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time, as you mentioned before. I mean, you're reading documents and papers and everything. It's like hundreds of pages or even more, do you think that there's a point where they expect too much from you?
Yeah, I think in terms of size of records and, like I'm pretty honest with them about, I can handle this case. I can't right now, this is what the timing looks like. But I think the only disconnect to some degree, and honestly, it's just mainly with the younger, newer attorneys, because they just don't have the experience yet, is understanding what we can actually say. It's very clear that we're not to speculate, right? So, but they'll ask questions that anyone that answered that would be speculating, and so we can say, like, is it likely that this person could need a surgery in the future? We have enough experience to say that. But when they say, is it a 30% chance or a 40% chance? I mean, that is speculation, right? We do not have the data for that. And so I think sometimes I get questions with people that are, a lot of times it's the junior attorney on the case with the senior attorney, and it gets
right. Yeah.
But you can kind of tell by their questions that the absolution that they want, that's based on interpretation of case law and the way that they live, that's a little more black and white in some areas, although they'll make it gray if they can, but some of it's black and white. We just really can't say some of those things. And so we
Yeah.
our medical opinion more likely than not, that whole phrase that we have to repeat a billion times. Like, we can say that, but when you talk about, do they want more? Some people would love for us to be more definitive. And I'm not stupid. I can sense that you want me to just give you that bullet. I'm like, I can get as close as I feel comfortable getting, and that's it. And so most of the time I found that with attorneys, what they really want is they don't like surprises, which is a lot like me. So they are risk averse, and they don't want to get to trial and find out that I was more confident before trial than I am in trial, right? And we don't want.
Yeah.
My job is to just make things as clear as I can in the beginning. And I view personally, my job is to explain exposure for them. Is here's the risk in this case for you. And if you got a bad case, it's best to know it right now. And
what type of cases are you normally involved in, John? Is it normally like accidents, like personal injury cases, that kind of thing, or do you get more involved in more kind of, I want to say, more intricate type case structure?
Yeah, so the most of them are car accidents. I get some, workers' compensation injury type accidents too, which I treat in my regular practice. So that's a natural extrapolation to review those cases when I'm not involved in them as the physician. And we get some of them are really complex, injuries that happened 10 years ago, and we're still trying to figure out what is related down the road. And,
that must be quite difficult though.
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, so I like the logical side of me likes to create extremes in an argument and then work in the middle and figure out, what makes sense. And one of the things that happens all the time, and I'll give you the best example, like with workers' comp, someone will come in and they'll have some arthritis in their neck, but they never had pain, and they had a work injury, let's say a real mechanism, forklift turned around, hit them, knocked them unconscious. And now they have some neck pain, they have some arm pain. And they'll review the imaging and they'll say, well, yeah, but they have all this arthritis in their neck. And that's always the argument from the other side. That's why we don't want to cover it, right? It's all this arthritis in their neck. And I'm not saying everything is related to an accident. Of course not. But
no,
if we're going to use the existence of arthritis or whatever as a reason to exclude the possibility of an acute injury, then we need to get rid of the workers' comp system altogether, because everyone over 30 has arthritis. There's no point to cover them, and there's no point for them to even pay their monthly premiums, because everyone has arthritis, therefore they cannot be injured. Obviously, that's not true. Obviously, that's how we treat things. So if that's not how we treat things, then I have a problem with that type of argument being brought up in the beginning. Like, okay, well, that's a non-starter. I mean, so you need something different to say that they can't have this pain, not just the existence of some arthritis, unless you can show me prior medicals or something that they've had this problem before. So those are really the things where we're trying to fetter out, like, what could be related to this or that. And there's varying extremes. You can have someone with 4 levels of terrible arthritis in their neck, and they're on a 5-mile-an-hour fender bender. And yeah, physical therapy and anti-inflammatories, very reasonable. But if they need a surgery, the fact that their surgery that they need will be a 4-level fusion, whereas if it was you or me, we might need something much smaller. That might scales where now the main reason for the need for that surgery is not the accident. For the surgery, it's their pre-existing condition. But for the treatment leading up to the surgery, it was the accident. And
what about the argument, John, that that is lifestyle, lifestyle choices where people are just predisposed to having arthritis, so to speak, it runs in the family, or their lifestyle choice, we have an old saying in the intelligence game, your pattern of life is maybe the choices that you make are not good, even what you eat or your nutrition. So surely there's an argument for that as well, for if you're defense.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes both ways. Like, I'll give you the extreme version of that. So what we're getting into is kind of the eggshell doctrine type stuff. And
yeah.
If you got a 99-year-old lady walking down the crosswalk and you're just trying to get to the other side and you breeze by her and she falls down and breaks both hips, versus if it's a 19-year-old who doesn't even notice that you touched them, your offense is the same, but the end result is dramatically different. The consequence.
I was going to say, yeah.
It's dramatically different. Now, I use that example because no one would fault a 99-year-old for being frail. But I do think it's challenging intellectually, even politically, to get into fault for self-deprecation or whatever. So, like, we used to say, well, in medical school, it's so easy to say, we'll just ban cigarettes everywhere because people are causing their own lung cancer. Or if they smoke cigarettes, we won't cover them with health insurance. Those concepts make sense on the surface because they're harming themselves and they know it's bad.
Absolutely.
Well, so is McDonald's. Like we all do things to some degree that are not the best thing for us. I don't know anyone that works out 6 days a week and only eats, perfect food all the time. So then you're starting to get into the morality police. Who's going to be the person that says, well, you were mainly pretty good, but you were kind of bad. So you were good enough that we're going to say it's not your fault. And so it gets into a slippery moral judgment situation, which is why I think for the most part, we treat people, whether it's their own behavior or age or frailty or whatever. I kind of treat people with the eggshell thing, which is, yeah, if someone was overweight and prone to having multiple issues, but they didn't, and then they had an accident, then yes, they might be having an issue that they shouldn't have these other problems, but they also wouldn't have it were it not for the accident. And I'm careful to say, like, here's my interpretation of what happened and medically how it affected people. I'm not going to tell you here's how the court should adjudicate it. That's not my job.
I want to jump back.
I have the training for it. So.
I want to jump back because there's a few things that you've covered that I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking this is something that you should have been taught to deal with through medical school, because as you mentioned at the beginning, you didn't have any training for this, but this is obviously really important within your field because we live in a dangerous society. You can knock down or something happens in the workplace. I guess that, medical consultants like you are not ready for this.
No. And what's more, and I'll give you just a really brief story on this. When we do workers' comp, because there's a lot of similarities, we get no briefing on that. I still remember my first few workers' comp patients coming in, and I just saw the insurance they had and just thought it was another insurance company. Like I didn't know.
No intel, nothing.
Didn't know there's other rules. And
wow.
I'm someone who had some restrictions at work during our treatment. And at the end, we basically decided that they needed permanent restrictions. He had a really heavy job and he had a permanent injury, which was fine, except the day I made it permanent restrictions, he was terminated from his job because they were like, well, we can't accommodate this. And from 30,000 foot view, you kind of understand it. If he's paid to be a diesel mechanic and he can't lift more than 10 pounds, he probably can't be a diesel mechanic. The problem in all this was myself, that patient, we had no idea that could happen, that they could just, because they hadn't terminated him during the temporary restrictions because they were getting comp insurance to pay him. Anyway, the whole process that dramatically affected his life and changed my kind of motive to learn more about the process. None of that was explained to anyone. How to think about injuries and responsibility for injuries, that's not part of training. Training is the injury happened. How do you fix it? Should you fix it? Should you take him to the operating room? That's what training is focused on. And so for those of us that found an interest here, it's in talking to other experts. It's in talking to the attorneys. I mean, I'd asked several attorneys when I first started, can you send me the best report you've ever gotten from an expert? Because I'd love to read it. And I want to understand, like, how did they phrase it?
Have they done that? Have they sent you yeah, they have done. And
Great.
you see the vast difference in it.
I want to change the formatting for my reports and how I gave more detail here, less detail here, and literally structure of things. Because I'd ask them, why do you like the report? What is it? Oh, well, this is to the point. This documents all this stuff. This is the phrasing we like at the end. Whether you agree or disagree, we want rock solid phrase, in terms of how you state things. So that was really helpful. But yeah, if you're not interested in doing this, then it's fine that they don't get the training for it. I'm just frustrated to some degree that it's not even brought up as an option, because you could have at least spent a week.
Yeah, I would think it should be. I honestly would think it should be, because the more and more that you get involved, I suppose, in the medical community, even the legal community, lawyers need experts like yourself. They need surgeons, they need medical doctors, they need they need experts, and yet it doesn't come up.
Right. It's so true. I mean, it is a very interesting thing. And then when you get to where I'm at now, where I'm a little busier with this stuff, which I love, structurally, is how are you going to scale and make those decisions? Like I do Fridays, like today's, Friday.
Yeah, this is normally your day where you're, Deposition Friday.
That's right. If there's IMEs, I do them in the office. If I don't, this is the time I review records. But it's blocked off time, because at some point you have to decide, am I going to do less of this or more of this? because you're busy enough that I'm reviewing them every night. I'm reviewing them on the weekends, and that's time I want to spend with my family. So I'm like, okay, if I like doing this, we need to set some designated time, which means taking away time from clinical practice. So
Right.
that you expect to go down. So there's some planning that I think for non-entrepreneurial physicians is not intriguing to them. Like, I like business growth and personal finance and all that. And if you're not interested in those things, it could probably seem overwhelming.
Right.
And I get that. So there's a lot of potential factors that could inhibit people from getting there. But, I've really enjoyed it so far and kind of leaned into it. And for the most part, I feel like I have a lot of return business from the offices around here. But
Yes.
Nashville's not massive, and there's only so many that they injure their spine. And so, always interested in doing more.
Can you expand, because obviously you're licensed in Tennessee, you're licensed in Texas, can you expand into other states should you want to actually do a lot more of this, like North Carolina here or?
Yeah, so that would potentially be the next few steps is, I've done a few in Texas, and for the most part, most of these cases for personal injury don't go to court. So their costs.
Yeah, it's often just agreed because they don't want to go to court because it costs too much.
Realistically, no side wants to go to court. So if they don't go to court, then the deposition and IME, all that, the cost to the attorneys is basically the same whether I'm there or not, because I'm going to review the records from here. Who cares? For the IME, I've done some IMEs where people from Texas, and they typically fly them into me instead of the other way around. So yeah, they're paying for their airfare or whatever, but it's not terrible, and I fit them in the schedule. And then the depositions, over Zoom or something. It doesn't become an issue unless it's in court, and then it's just a travel cost for me to get over there, which is a little different. But by the time you're going to court, that travel cost becomes probably negligible. But we kind of thought, well, we'll grow organically first, and then we'll market a little bit, seek database, stuff like that. And then what we're doing here, can we grow a little bit more where we can find our steady state, where like an all day Friday, I'm booked up and we're fine with what we're doing, but we're not. The goal is also not to find a job that makes more money but involves significantly more stress. Like you can always buy more stress. I don't want more stress. Just because it is less stressful. So we want to be, I'd probably like to be about twice as busy as I am now at a max, but 3 or 4 times, there's always another dollar to get. That's not the goal here. The goal is to get enough and to define for myself what that is, and for my family what that is. And there to enjoy it and not to, struggle to the point of no end. So
I'm going to jump in just in a minute to the morality police a little bit as well, which from the plaintiff and the defense side of things. But I want to talk a little bit about your passion for clinical work and your passion for. Clearly, you have a passion for both. But do you think there's going to be a time, John, where maybe the legal work would take over your clinical side, or are you just love the clinical work and you're going to stick with that?
Yeah, I like the clinical work a lot. It is, I'm biased because you spend so much time training to do it. And you do feel like, although that did lay the groundwork for my legal work and the understanding of what I do, time to replace what I do, and with AI and all this stuff, like maybe the legal work side of what I do could be replaced to some degree, or at least a lot of the time or compensation could be replaced by computers at some point. It will probably be after my career's over before we're letting computers and robots do a spine surgery on people for, legal reasons and insurance reasons, all sorts of stuff. And it's just technically hard. So I do enjoy that. The other part of it is you really can't be an effective expert, and some states prohibit it, if you're not actively practicing.
Right. So you need the balance.
You got to have balance. And so I think, if you ask me 15 years from now, when my youngest kid's out of high school, what do I think I'll be doing? I think I'll be doing both, but I think I'll probably be doing a little bit less clinical work. I think I'll do less in the extent that I will, I'd like to take more weeks of vacation because I want to see them wherever they are. I'm presuming I won't be lucky enough to have all 4 living here in Nashville. So, that's the scaling back I would do when I get older.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the medical legal work is if I have a kid in school at Tennessee or Texas or wherever, I can do it from there, and we can plan that without it becoming overly burdensome, but, I think from clinical practice perspective, the retirement date is really just based on balance and satisfaction. Unless I'm 70 something and I don't have the ability to see or do the job for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I don't really ever anticipate, I enjoy my job, so I don't ever anticipate not wanting to do it. I just imagine I probably wouldn't do it 60 hours a week.
You mentioned something I'm going to jump in, and this is changing tactic a little bit, because I just before we did this, I recorded an interview. Not an interview. I recorded me talking about AI and the use of AI in law, and I have my particular thoughts and feelings. I don't know if you read the recent MIT study on AI and how there was so much cognitive decline in the use of AI. So you mentioned something about, would the AI perhaps take over what you do, even in clinical work or in the legal work? I have my own feelings about that, which we can discuss in a minute. But where do you feel that that's going? What's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see it every day. I mean, just using my phone to ask Google something, the AI suggestion at the top is quite efficient. There are obviously benefits to it. Without getting too political, there are obviously some downsides. Some of the structures that they build, the power usage, the jobs that it will take away.
Oh, yeah. AI data centers and water, and even potential Legionella pathogen outbreaks in place. And it's massive.
Not great. And then I was born in the 80s, which means I grew up in the 90s, which means Terminator 2 was on repeat constantly when I was growing up. And Terminator 2 is all
I remember that. Yeah. I'm older than you a lot, but I remember that.
I mean, every time someone talks about AI or the robots are doing this, I'm like, did you
You
guys
remember that, don't you?
I mean, this is not good. There was a really interesting simulation that they did where they had AI inside of a closed model, but the model didn't know that it was closed. So it thought, and they had a fake company that it was managing emails for. And they sent some emails back and forth, and it was supposed to do automatic response emails and stuff like that, but it existed in this ecosystem. And so they had the boss send some emails to other people that it was thinking about closing down the AI project. And the AI responded by sending an email back to the boss that it had seen other emails from the boss that he was having an affair, and he was going to release those emails if he continued to basically blackmail. And in this situation, they thought it was just one form of AI, but then they said across multiple software versions of AI, it was like something like 70% of the time it chose to blackmail someone. I mean, all on its own, because it perceived a potential into its own existence, which is, if that's not, something that has the wherewithal to know that it exists, I don't know how that's that different from people. So all that stuff is kind of scary. I think when it comes to what we do, decision making in medicine, a lot of it is algorithmic at a very simplistic level, but there's so many variables that come in. We've always kind of treated it like, well, it's not really algorithmic. You need a doctor with all this training. And I do think that's true. But with computers that can process more, it's not a bad thing to have computers help with diagnosis, to have them help read film from a patient perspective. If I'm a radiologist, it makes me nervous. Radiologists will also tell you that they've been hearing that for 20 years, that the next program is going to put them out of a job. But it is concerning that AI is a little different this time around, and that it might be good enough to do a lot of those things. I mean, we already see with, I've had some companies send me records, and they run their digital records through an AI program that timelines all the records. And assuming you can trust the little summary sentences that it puts in there, I mean, it's extremely effective. And for the cost versus the 20 hours it might take to timeline those records, it probably saves them a lot of money. The tough thing is when I get those is they'll send me that timeline, and then they also send me the 5,000 pages of records. And they're like, if you want, you can just kind of use this timeline. I'm like, well, my problem is if I go to court and they say, did you read the records? Like, what if I say, no, I just read the AI timeline? Well, who are we going to sue if there's something wrong? AI? I mean, and if it's me and I got to put my name on it, I'm reading the 5,000 records, and then, sorry, I'm not going to charge you for 2 hours of work. I'm going to charge you for this. So we're kind of in a limbo right now, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
I am, and the reason I jumped into this is because you mentioned a word called trust. How can you trust something that's algorithmic as well? Remember that there's anybody who's listening out there, these algorithms, the input is coming from human beings.
That's right.
There's human error. We talk about AI as being hallucinogenic, where it can make hallucinations, and they're getting better at it, but it is still human input, and the data is still being collected from human input. And where I tend to differ, which is the previous episode that I just recorded, is I'm a big proponent of your inner awareness, your intuition, having that feeling. And you as a doctor, you as a surgeon, going through all this paper, there could be something in a case that is missed in data, and it's your feeling and it's your internal compass that thinks, well, this is not right. Maybe I can connect W to X and maybe A and C. Maybe I can connect, and then you find the pattern. And in that pattern recognition, based on your level of training, your experience, that can't be beaten by AI.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there are, as an example, we'll read notes sometimes and we just see copied forward the same type of exam, or we'll see the way that they phrase things. Like one of the radio reports I saw, that they phrased it and said, yeah, there's this disc herniation, it's likely related to the car accident. Well, like, how do they know about the car accident? Sometimes we put in there that they had it in the ordering thing, but what it did to me is I was like, this kind of isn't normally how they would read this. Like, I wonder if this is a radiologist who's working for basically a PI type clinic with, where the patient.
Right. See?
So it makes you think, okay, let me look at those notes again. They were pretty aggressive in doing this stuff and, and improving things. Let me look at the charges. Like maybe this was more of a, system like that. I mean, I agree. I think over time, there are probably even patterns like that it will get better at picking up on. You'd like to think in a perfect world, you would look at it and then you'd see what AI said and you'd see if you missed something. Like, can it expose my blind spots, which would be very helpful. That's how we use radiologists now. I read MRIs in practice. Then I read the report and I see, did I miss something? The problem is, and I think what you were alluding to a minute ago, is if you are teachers, you say it in school, if you use a calculator all the time, you won't be able to do the mental math. And
that's
they would
it.
you that, well, what are you going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket all day? Well, I do, right? My phone does better graphing than the TI-83 ever dreamed of.
Absolutely.
But if you use AI all the time to not just solve the math problem, but to think for you, to critically think, to do steps like finding...
You lose the critical thinking.
You lose it. And that's always the argument of, like, Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about calculus, where people complain, like, when am I ever going to use calculus in life? And he would say, most people don't, but it's not about using calculus. It's about during the time that you took calculus, you taught your brain to think in a way that is important to solve.
That's it.
And if we don't stretch our brains, and I get worried about kids that grow up with AI, that they don't have to stretch their brain.
My thoughts exactly.
Yeah, they might not hit their potential. And then you become overly reliant on a technology, which, by the way, isn't free, is owned by companies.
And there's costs to that as well. But not only that, if your kid relies on, and here's the thing that you talk about as well, we're talking about having hallucinations, and where you exemplified the AI starting to think for itself and then going against the boss and waiting to expose it. What if we get to the point where the AI is taking this data, the kid or the person is not thinking for themselves, and it makes the decision based on how aggressive a case may be,
right?
And where maybe the defense loses out when actually the defense should have won.
Right. I mean, because you could take to a logical extreme, like, if AI is capable of doing all this, then we don't need any of this. We just put the data in there and it says guilty or innocent, right? Or it says pay this amount of money or whatever. Like, because in theory, if we can replace the physician experts and the surgeons and all that stuff, then we could replace the attorneys and we could replace the judge. And we obviously, most people would not agree that that is the best way to take this. So the problem is how much of AI expansion is driven by corporate profits and private industries and entities and rich people making decisions about where things go.
Exactly.
And driven by thoughtful, slow progression with laws. And the problem is, anytime technology expands like this, as we see all the time, is regulation tends to lag behind technology. And this one might be kind of the cat's out of the bag problem. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, no one knows, obviously, we just kind of speculate, but it does have, to your question earlier, a little bit of an impact on what you advise your kids to do. You probably want something that's at least a little protected from that potential devastating impact on the job market. But we don't know what it'll look like. So
let's jump into a little. I want to go back to the whole the moral police, because you mentioned as well at the beginning that you've worked for defense, but you work for plaintiff. So I guess what I want to, do you find that difficult? Because maybe you're in a case, John, you've looked at the documents, You clearly see that there's a case that warrants the plaintiff, but the defense are stronger and they win. But you know that it should have went the other way. How do you reconcile that in your own mind, or do you just segregate yourself from it and you just do a job?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can have a situation like that maybe you think should have gone the other way, and feel some sympathy for the people that lost. But you also have to have, one of the things you learn in medicine, I mean, is when you run codes in medical school and in residency, and people die in the ER that shouldn't have died, and you see kids that are injured and stuff, is if you carry all the negative stuff with you, you won't be able to help the next person. That's just not a thing you can do. So there is some cognitive dissonance that's required,
Yes.
to kind of press on. And that's not the same as stuffing everything down and never thinking about it, but there's some level of processing. Did I do my job? Did I do the best that I could do? Is there something I should do different next time? And that's it. And at the end of the day, that's kind of how it works with what I do in medicine. If someone in the ER does a great job getting someone stabilized, and they get to me and they need some spine surgery and the outcome wasn't as great, the ER doc can't be mad. They did everything they could do. And maybe both of us did everything we could do, and something still didn't work out. And with the attorneys, I'm not an attorney, right? And I'm not a judge. And so they could have made a great argument and lost, or maybe they made a bad argument and lost, but I'm not making the argument, So, I view my job, like I mentioned earlier, is to explain where exposure is. And if they're going to depose someone else, then I'll frequently say, like, hey, when you depose them, I would ask about this and this.
Yeah.
And I would ask them the difference between these two things. And I typically tell them, most doctors are like myself. They don't want to be confronted or be confrontational themselves. So a lot of times when I'm on one side and they're deposing the treating doctor about cause, and the treating doctor said, yeah, we think it's related to the accident, and I'm on the defense side, for instance, I might say, well, they didn't have access to all these other records. So you should point out that, well, yeah, but you made this opinion without these 3,000 pages, prior records. So is it reasonable that knowing this now, maybe it's, you give people an out, and a lot of times they'll take an out to reduce the temperature in the room, and so
Right.
I try to just coach them a little bit on some potential strategy, but that doesn't have anything to do with my opinion. My opinion is my opinion. And I'm like, if you would like to know how I might ask questions so that the judge or the jury could better parse out the difference between what I'm saying and what was previously said, here's how you might ask the question to differentiate, things. And then, of course, in my report, I try to make differentiations between what I'm saying, and if there's a previous IME or something, I would explain why I think that's not valid. Or like for impairment ratings, I think they did their math wrong here, and I'm a certified impairment rater in Tennessee. Like, I did all this special training to know how to do these impairment ratings. And so this is my math, and here's how we did. I think this is the mistake they made, which was not malicious, but that's what happened. Like, I will try to spell that out so that they're best prepared to get the outcome. But if you don't get the outcome, you don't get the outcome. I mean, it's the same lesson I teach my kids. I'm like, did you play hard? Okay, your team lost by 20. It sucks. You can train a little harder, but like, you can't make your teammate make that shot. Like, it is what it is, and
You've just got to accept it and roll with the punches and keep rolling on.
You do. You can't let that define whether you have a good day or bad day, or good month or bad month. Like, that's not how you define your own internal success. Or at least I don't think you can, if you want to have a sustainable career and a happy life.
What is the hardest case that you ever worked on that was so complicated that it took a lot out of you?
Yeah, we had, so I've had a couple. Probably the toughest emotional one I had was one where it was the defense company, but they knew that they were going to be paying for, so it was a 18-wheeler accident. And it was a lady in her 70s who was in the ICU for 2 weeks and almost died, and just horrific injuries. And it was not it's not like the guy was drinking and driving. He just hit her. It was an accident. It truly was an accident. But her injuries were devastating. And that's tough, because you're reading through this stuff, and the doctor's notes put in there about the family members coming, and they're trying to make decisions about, should we extubate her and like let her pass, and like but you're reading all this stuff. Like, that's emotionally challenging,
That is emotionally challenging. How do you deal with that as well, essentially?
Yeah, it's tough because you can't read it like a story. Because if you read it like a story, in a novel, there's a protagonist and there's an antagonist.
Yeah, and you get connected to it.
You do. And but what you would make it out if you read it like that is the truck driver's the bad guy. And the truth is, the truck driver's not a bad guy. The truck driver was an accident. And you know what? I bet it was super traumatic for him too. And as I
Yeah,
remind
you need a level of discernment from both angles.
you do, and I remind my kids all the time, you know, when this kid's a bad kid in my class, he's not a bad kid. Okay, he might have done something you didn't like, but everyone is the protagonist in their own story. Okay, they all think they're the good guys, and they might be,
Yeah.
but you know, so I think it's important when you are reading medical documentation, when you're preparing for court, that I remember that there is no assumption of a negative person just because I'm employed by this attorney or the other one for this case. You know, so that's challenging to do. You know, I had another one that was the most challenging technical case that was actually not a spine case. It was a guy who had multiple amputations of fingers and upper extremity injuries, and they still haven't settled all the stuff, so I can't get into a ton of details. But the point is, so many different things that we need impairment ratings on, and add it all together and figure out what his total impairment is. And he was in one of those situations, like a lot of people, where they get a work-related injury, and then ultimately workers' comp says, we're done. At this point, you've reached maximum improvement no matter what it is. But they lost their job because of it. And now they either don't agree that they're done, like they still needed more treatment for the problem, or they need treatment for another problem. They don't have health insurance because they don't have a job. And they can't get a new job because they were only trained for this job. And in this guy's case, he just fingers amputated. They can't do that job anymore. So all he ever did was go to work. And
it's
now,
a domino effect because it's not just that injury, it's affecting every other aspect.
that's right. So those are challenging, you know, to deal. You're talking to that person, and in his case, you know, he had a lot of details and was super helpful, and you can hear the desperation. But then it's challenging technically because you're reading a lot of records and trying to add up all these numbers and make sure that you don't make any errors, so that, you know, because one of the problems that happens, like we do this in life, is if I came in and I accused you, if I said, well, you killed this guy and you killed this girl and you burned this house down, and then you got a speeding ticket, and you came back and said, I never got a speeding ticket on that day. Here's proof I was somewhere else. That distraction of the fact that I made one error in my argument is enough to take the wind out of the sails for all of these way more serious things that you might have actually done. And
absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
So when you make an accusation, or when I make a case, I'm very careful that I'm as close to 100% factual on everything that I do, because poking one hole in credibility, even if it was a math error,
it'll fall. It's like a domino. It's just going to fall.
That's right. So I'm very cognizant of that, but that takes 50% more effort and energy to make sure it's that last 2% of perfection. But I'm cognizant of it because I see it when I review other people's records. I'm looking for that. I mean, I read oh, this is good. This is good. I'm like, wait, they made an error here. And then the attorneys do it to what they want. But a lot of times they're like, wait, if this guy can't add two numbers together, maybe we shouldn't trust his opinion on this, you know, and it's humans, right? It's a jury. It's a judge. Like, you can sway people.
Absolutely. And you can sway a jury, which is why even in the psychological warfare or anything like that, I mean, you can sway something just by, you know, getting a weakness, finding a chink in the armor, and then opening it up. Right. And then utilizing the right terminology or the right words or elicitation of information to get more into, so I can see where that gets, it can be quite troublesome, and it can change the whole direction of a case.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, you know, if someone kind of leans into you in a depot, that's where you can see, I've seen some depots of someone that gets called out on a small issue and then they just fly off the handle, you know, and it's like, I'm sure at some point in time I'll make some small error or whatever and they'll call me out on it. But my whole goal at the time is to own that problem. But that doesn't take away, you know, and specify, it doesn't take away these other things. But I've seen people that get called out on one thing now. So if you got that wrong, like, what are we supposed to believe your other records for, you know? And then they get defensive and face turns red, you know, like you don't, you know, you really don't want that. So fortunately I haven't been in that position yet, but when I sure undoubtedly at some point will make some error or something like that, you hope that you're controlled enough to be
ready for it.
Yeah. Stuff happens.
John, I want to thank you for being with me today. This has been a great conversation, actually. I've really enjoyed it. Just as a final thing, what is it that you would like attorneys to know, not just about you, but the way that you work, or maybe their expectations of how maybe cases, or if they were working with you, what is their expectation? What would you like them to know?
Yeah, biggest thing I'd like the attorneys to understand and work with me is that we're going to give you an honest opinion. I'm going to get it to you in as quick a timeline as I can. I like expectation setting from them. It's due on this day or this day, and we like to hit those targets. I like to make sure that I have, good communication with them. I frequently talk on the phone before we send a report because sometimes they don't want one, of course. But I enjoy doing this. I enjoy talking about it. Most of my phone calls with attorneys are scheduled for 5 minutes and they take 20 because we're just talking about whatever, or it becomes a conversation. So I've made friends with a lot of the local attorneys just like that because I enjoy talking to people. But I'm happy to help. I feel like I'm a relatively good resource. And, if they ever have something that they think I might be able to help with, I'm also open to just say, well, just tell me a little about it. And if I can't help, I'll be honest with that too. And, we'll get you to the right person. But always interested in doing more business if I can.
Excellent. John, thank you for being with me today on The Legal Owl. This has been awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any questions, if you're an attorney and you are not, if you're in Tennessee or even Texas or even outside of the area, you can contact Dr. John Burlson. You'll get him on help-lawyer.com. He has his whole profile there. And you can ask him any questions. And if you've got any questions for John about how he operates or what he does or any case work, then you can connect. You can connect with us direct on Help Lawyer. Also, anybody we've got a new app that's launching soon for the community where you can connect with experts like John privately to connect with them directly. So, John, thank you so much for being with me today. This has been really interesting from your point of view. I look forward to chatting to you again very soon. We'll hopefully get you back to talk about something else. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us today. If conversations like this matter to you, you'll find more in the Help Lawyer Network. Work with lawyers, expert witnesses, others support professionals in the legal industry. You feel that this is a fit and it aligns with your strategic requirements. You value discretion, value privacy. If you'd like to work with us, please join us on Help Lawyer.
You've been listening to The Legal Owl, where law meets the unseen layers of clarity, leadership, and inner alignment. If this sparks something in you, trust that feeling. Let it lead you. For deeper insights, real conversation, and strategic guidance, connect through the Help Lawyer Network and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you prefer a more private connection, you'll find the path when you're ready. Until next time, stay present, think deeper, and lead wiser.